This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is a show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love. Well, one thing that's been clear these past few weeks is this. You've had a lot of time to think. And if your thoughts have drifted to worry and fear about the future, I have a radical idea for you. What if instead you focused your thoughts on yourself? Does that sound selfish? Maybe not. There is a way to center your attention on yourself that can transform your life to new heights. We're going to discuss how with mindset expert Heather Elliott. Heather is the founder of Mindful Change, whose mission is to help people permanently break free from limiting patterns and into living a life they love. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Heather.
Thank you, Debbie. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you back with us. Heather, you're quoted as saying, "Your mind is the author of your life. Meet your mind, change your life." What do you mean by this?
Wow, that's a loaded statement. I've been studying the mind, Debbie, since the mid-'80s. That kind of speaks to my age a little. But back in the mid-'80s, there wasn't a lot of stuff around that indicated how reality happened. But I learned to use my mind back then to be able to create my world. I used subliminal tapes that I made for myself to change my life. So I just, embedded suggestions about the kind of life I was living, and lo and behold, within about 6 months, I was living it. I learned to use vision boards to identify the details of what I was creating, and I noticed that when I used that technique, it worked. So when I had a chance to study the mind more in depth, which I did in the late 80s and all through the 90s, I found that an even greater link to the mind and our reality, like the small thoughts that we don't think matter. And I founded a technique called the Mindful Change process in mid-2005 that helps people to be able to transform all of the subconscious programming that we have loaded in there throughout our entire lifetime, because it affects every single level of our life. The people we attract, the events that we're attracted to, how people treat us, the abundance or lack thereof. I mean, it's all in here, and it's all been conditioned into our brain, and we just run it like a script, and we don't even know we're doing it. Mm-hmm. That was a long answer.
Oh, but a very good answer. But it brings to mind my next question to you, which is, why is the default position for most people to focus on the negative parts of their life?
Because our entire culture has taught us to go there. If you want to go back to basic conditioning, what I said about the subconscious, it's been conditioned through a lifetime of input from the outside. When you think about the school system and how children are taught, is that they're shown their mistakes and they're asked to correct them. So the bias is automatic to the negative. So that, what's wrong with this? Or how can I be better? So in other words, we don't start with the positive, we start with the negative. And so as a culture, as a world, we actually do that like perpetually. Listen to the evening news. Listen to the pandemic news. They don't start with the good stuff. What they're doing is the world is conditioning us to look for the problems, and our school systems and our media are all like, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. Like we're just conditioned to expect to look for what's wrong and be afraid of it, and it's because of everything that's around us.
And that also brings up the point of languaging. The
Yes.
words we use also has an effect that way.
Oh, Huge, huge. I mean, without realizing it, Debbie, by the time a child is 7 years old, they have almost all of the conditioning they're going to use for the rest of their life. And it all comes from the language that they've heard used around them and the behaviors of the people, the core people in their lives, like their parents, their grandparents, their siblings, teachers, other students, etc. Like by the age of 7, it's all in here. And all that happens from the age of 7 on is that we project ourselves into what we expect to find. And life just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy based on the beliefs and ways we've been taught to expect the world to show up. And so the negative conditioning gets in there very, very, very early, and then just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. No matter where we are, we will be affected by the negative.
Is this why it's so hard for a lot of people to love themselves?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of a loaded question as well. But when I work with clients on my day-long sessions, we go back into their past to find out what is it that they believe that is interfering with their ability to move forward, or that's creating anxiety in them or making them depressed or whatever. And invariably, it takes them back to incidences that happened early in their life, and how they interpreted it was negatively. So they would have interpreted, mom's busy with the new baby as I'm not special anymore, or I don't matter. And what happens is once they start making decisions like that, then they just keep looking out through that lens, and they keep reinforcing, I don't matter and I'm not special anymore. There's something wrong with me because mom's off paying attention to that new baby. What's so special about the new baby, and where did my specialness go? It's fascinating to watch, but it's like, as a child, we will find the reason to doubt ourselves. And what we do in life is we just pull that doubt right through, and it creates the unworthiness that we feel most of our lifetime and that we battle.
Yeah, these are the stories that we tell ourselves that keep repeating. And it is amazing how, that one story, like let's say, I'm not worthy, it shows up at various points along a person's life if they haven't dealt with it.
Yeah. And all of us have it. Like, the interesting part, Debbie, there isn't anybody that doesn't have it. It's just a matter to what degree. Because you're right, depending on what happens in your life, it gets triggered, is what I call the word. So let's say a child forms the opinion that they don't matter, or they're not very worthy, they're not deserving. But then there are other parts of their life where they are worthy and deserving, and that's cool. So as long as life is going along and showing them that they're loved and worthy and deserving, it's all good. But then, in teenagehood, they get that rejection, or, as a child, maybe they had difficulty making friendships. And what happens is the moment life becomes hard, it automatically brings up that belief system that says, I don't deserve, or there's something wrong with me, or whatever it is that brings up their unworthiness. So it's kind of like in your own head, you have two stories running. You have the I'm worthy story, and you have the I'm not worthy story. And it just depends on what life circumstances happen to be, which story is going to get triggered, and which one is the bigger story. Do I have more of my life that says that it loves me, or do I have more of my life that says I don't count and I don't matter? And that will determine what your reality feels like to you.
And if the balance is where you have more of the my life doesn't matter, then that's when you get into trouble.
Yes. Or instances, Debbie, I used to work in the arena of separation and divorce. That was where I really developed my skill as this facilitator of change. And it was fascinating because these people would come through these programs and they would have felt okay. When they were married, they felt okay. But usually the people that came into our programs to rebuild their lives post-divorce, they were the ones that got dumped, not the ones that did the dumping. So we called them the dumpee. And so because they were the dumpee, all of their unworthiness was up, all of it. Like they walked into our session and they felt horrid because, somebody had left them, and oftentimes there was another person involved in it and that kind of thing. So it just depends on life circumstances. So for them, they're going to go through a period where they have to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild to build a life that starts to affirm them again. And they start to come out of that I'm worthless kind of state into a more worthy state. Now, when you think about what life is going through right now, and you think about these principles, what happens is, we're going through this, quote, pandemic. And, there's job losses, and there's health issues, and there's all sorts of fear and anxiety and everything else. And you'll notice that the TV and the newspapers, they lead with that stuff. I mean, they are not leading with the uplifting stories. They are leading with the fearful ones. And they're interviewing people that give you fearful thoughts about your future. And they forecast, oh my goodness, we could be here till next year, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's like, think of it like a divorce, is that we are going through this really anxiety-producing series of events. And if we ourselves lack confidence, or if we ourselves have anxiety or fear in us, this instability in the world just brings it right up. And it's going to put it right in your face. And the world, like the people in the world, are going crazy. So it's easy to pick up on the vibrations around you and start to reflect them outwards, and get caught in that spiral of, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? And that's where it becomes critical to pay attention to what you're paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to have said, just turn off all media.
Yes.
You'll be much better off for it.
Yeah, because it winds you up. I mean, I come down every morning and I say to my husband, because he's been watching the news, and I say, so anything new today? He'll give me the clips, boom, boom, boom. And I'm going, good, that's it.
Is it a man thing? Because my husband is like obsessed with watching the news, and I'm like, no, it's not doing us any good to do this.
It just depends on the personality whether they do. My husband's usually pretty good about, he'll get top hits and then turn it off. I won't even do the top hits for the most part, unless they happen to be talking about something related to business. I won't even do it. Like, I'm not listening to all these medical advisors and this, that, and the other thing. I have a different view about health, and one that is infinitely more connected to our minds and our emotions than what most people have. And that's been part of my training as well. I don't know whether you've ever heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yes.
He's a very well-known scientist and researcher, and I follow his work, and he's done some incredible research about our power to affect our immune system. And that's the stuff that I pay attention to. And it all leads back to your mind and how you're using it, and staying out of this kind of anxiety and fear that life seems to want to put you into. Yeah.
Well, one of the ways to get rid of this anxiety and fear is through your program, Mindful Change. And you have 5 core beliefs that sort of make up the program. Could you go into that? First one is life is perfect.
Yes. Okay. And let me tell you, it's challenged. It's challenged in this time that life is perfect, because, when you look at life and you don't judge it, Debbie, you can't be anxious about it. Now, that is a real trick, because right now, I mean, what they're telling us life is, and I'll say it like that, what the news media is telling us life is seems dreadfully scary. So how is it that you see it as perfect? And it requires an act of faith to know that we have way more control than what we're being taught that we do. And that the second thing is that I know that as individuals, we're in charge of each of our own personal realities. So as much as other people are scared and getting sick and having problems, you can be in your own little bubble where you're in charge of your life. And as long as you don't lose focus on your abundance and your strength and your confidence, you can keep your world in a state that is relatively perfect for you. even in the face of all sorts of upheaval around you by other people. It's a real trick. Like it's a really hard mental exercise, but it's something that I've been training for since the early 90s.
Well, we're going to talk more about this. We have to take a little short break now. We are speaking about mindful change with Heather Elliott, and we'll be right back. Join me, my fellow Raven International podcasters and broadcasters from around the world, in a joyous salute to the heroes of the pandemic. On June 12th, the Raven International Network is devoting the entire day to a star-studded list of speakers who will inspire, empower, and connect with you. Watch on the Raven International Network channel on Roku or Amazon Fire, or listen on podcasts everywhere. See you on the 12th.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're speaking with Heather Elliott about mindful change. And Heather, we were talking about the parts of your program, Mindful Change. And the second part of it is based on the belief that no one is unbroken.
No one is broken. Oh yes, every person is unbroken.
Yeah.
It's a principle. Our society likes to speak a lot about disease and brokenness and you got to fix this and all this kind of stuff. When I look out into the world, what I see are people that are creating their world, and they're creating it quite powerfully from the belief systems they have, is that they are not broken, even though it may feel bad. My truth is that they're not broken people. It's that they carry a belief system that they're empowering subconsciously that they don't realize they're empowering, that's causing them problems. So rather than approaching people and their limitations from the perspective of disease or brokenness, I approach it from the perspective that they're powerful beings and they just need to edit their own programs so that their life can become what it is they desire to experience.
And then the next part of it is life is a virtual reality.
Yes, indeedy, it is.
How is it?
This is based on the physics, quantum physics, and if you've ever heard of Greg Braden is he's a scientist as well, and he explains the quantum physics perspective really well. But in a nub, what it is that we, as observers, whatever we're thinking, it's kind of like it becomes a projection out into the world. And if you can think of your world as like a screen, what happens is that the quantum around you will start to mirror whatever it is that you're thinking. So that if you're coming out of a place of strength and confidence, what you will notice is you'll attract people to you that are strong and confident. If you're coming out of a place of insecurity and fear, you'll attract to you bullies and people that'll take advantage of you. And so what happens is that you become like a magnet, and you are attracting the experiences into your life that match the way that you think. So that's why I say it's a virtual reality. There's a lot more to it in terms of the science, but I won't go into that today.
So it's basically like the law of attraction.
Very much so. Very much so. But the key behind the quantum physics thing is that, and I see this with my clients, is that if they come into me and they're anxious or unworthy in some respect, and we are able to write that kind of thinking in the session, when they go out, they will report to me that I went home and my husband was different. And I'll say, okay, different how? Oh, he was just nicer to me. He seemed more supportive, like we had a really good conversation. And so it's kind of like even the people in your life suddenly start treating you differently. And the only thing that changed was how you saw yourself. So it's not even attraction. What I know is it's like you're stimulating in other people, you're stimulating who you are. You've heard the phrase that other people are who you are. They're not separate from you. They're a mirror to you. And there's a truth there, because what I've found is that if we start to feel better in ourselves, suddenly the people in our life will start treating us differently. And all we changed was how we saw ourselves.
And that sort of leads into the next principle, which is the mind is the key to unlock our true potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, we've been conditioned since we were children. We've been conditioned by life circumstances. We've been conditioned by the school system, by the media, etc. If you can think of it this way, is that life has told us who to be. It's also told us about our potential. So, way back in the day when I was a teacher, there was something called the self-fulfilling prophecy. They did a study where, they gave a classroom full of kids to a teacher, and they told that teacher, hey, you have got the bright lights. Man, you have got the cream of the crop. These are like really sharp kids. You are going to have a great year. And then they put another room full of children with another teacher, and they said, you know what? These guys, they're bad. Okay, you're going to have behavior problem after behavior problem. They, struggle with learning. They, you're going to have a hard year. So just, buckle up because it's going to be a bad deal. And what they found is that the biggest influence on what happened in the classroom was the teacher's expectation. Is that, and these were random kids. These were not selected based on intelligence or non-intelligence. These were just random groups of kids that were given to different teachers. And that study was repeated with more than just one classroom. This was repeated over several classrooms with the same results. So the thing of it is that, potential is one of those things that we can cultivate inside of ourselves when we believe that we can do it, or we have somebody who believes that we can. But it's all about the mental stuff. It's all about, feeling inside and believing in ourselves and having the strength to be able to follow our path. That's what allows us to realize our potentials.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I have an anecdotal story to tell about that relates to that study. When I was in first grade, the teacher divided us into two groups for reading. And this was like the dawn of the space age. So one group was called the Rockets, and the other group was called the Satellites.
Wow.
Well, guess which group was the better readers? The Rockets, because the Rockets were going straight up into the sky. And the Satellites were just moving around and around and not going anywhere.
It's true. It's true. And the thing...
And I'm sure that they didn't do it deliberately. It's just words, but
it's subconscious, though, Debbie. I'll bet you those teachers did in their own mind. They gave them imagery that, unless you really understood, it would mean the Rockets, they knew darn well, were probably the kids that were going to excel, and the Satellites were the ones that were going to have a harder time. And they may have subconsciously known it, but yes. And it affects everybody. And that's how kids get labeled, by the way. Remember, by the age of 7, they have the foundation of what, who they are and their relationship to life. Well, kids in school, because they're in school at the age of 4, and some were in daycare ahead of that, and everything is about learning now. So they go to daycare, and it's not just playing anymore. They have to learn their ABCs, and they got to learn to write and this, that, and the other thing. So it's all about learn, 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 learn. And, so by the time they are 7 years old, they have a pretty strong idea whether they're smart and capable or whether they're not. And it becomes their self-fulfilling prophecy very early on.
I know, it's amazing on how that works. I want to get into a little bit about the specifics of your program, because one area that causes a lot of stress for people is money. Especially now, things going crazy as they are. So how would your process help someone change their beliefs about their finances?
That's a loaded one too. It's a complex one, because the first thing that abundance, when we're in a normal world, okay, Debbie, so the world pre-pandemic where, people are going to school, getting trained, expecting to go out into workplaces, etc., where everything was kind of functioning normally. Usually the first thing that shows up as a problem with abundance, I call it, is a worthiness issue. So if something deep down in us doesn't see ourselves as worthy or deserving, stray beliefs like that, that's going to cause us to struggle in terms of having what we want. And the material stuff is what we've been trained to want. So it's going to show up there first. The other thing that can happen is the school system thing, growing up believing we're not capable. It comes loaded with all sorts of other beliefs like, if I'm not smart, then I'm not going to do much in life, and I'm not going to go anywhere, and I can expect to struggle. Or maybe you grew up in a neighborhood where there's a lot of welfare or social assistance type situations, and so you've come to believe that is your destiny, like that's as good as it gets. So you can, depending on where you grew up, you adopt some attitudes around abundance and money and prosperity that way. Then you have the people that are born into wealth. And guess what? They will never be without Debbie, because their whole foundation belief is rooted in the knowledge that they're wealthy. Absolutely rooted in it. So what you find are all sorts of money beliefs and limitations sitting in the belief systems around what I can have and what I can't have. What's possible, what's not. I know that the foundation of us being powerful beings is that we are also infinitely abundant, but we are taught to look outside of ourselves for that abundance. And if we're not connected to a job, a business, some kind of inheritance or income, we assume that we are not abundant beings. And that's what we're experiencing going through this pandemic, is if you're disconnected from your normal supply of money, then you're going to fall into that belief that you're powerless and helpless and a victim. Whereas as a powerful being who creates your reality, which is where I was taught to come from, is that you can create your reality anytime. It's irrelevant what's going on in the world around you. You are still the creator of that life. And whether I use mind movies, I use vision boards, I use vision cards, I use walking meditation, and I go into meditation and create there. But I know we're powerful beings, and what we focus upon, we will manifest. So, and I know that it doesn't always hinge on what's happening in the outside world, that we have the ability to create our solutions ourselves, but we need to know to become a creator instead of an employee. Most of us are taught to be good employees and to wait for somebody to, hire us and provide for us. The training that I've done is very much about how to use focus in specific ways to create the reality you want to experience. Because again, life is a virtual reality. It will become whatever you dream it to become. And that's important in these times.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to, the example of money. So somebody comes to you now and they're saying, I'm just totally stressed out about money. I feel like I'm never going to make any more money again, given everything that's going on. How can you help them?
Well, one of the things that I do is I'm a big believer in the meditation stuff. Dr. Joe Dispenza does a lot of work on the meditation stuff. And it's all about moving your frequency out of that fear-based state. Like, in order to help anybody right now, they have to be able to move out of their fearful pictures that they're making in their head, and they have to really fight against them. So whatever technique is going to work for them, I would teach them. So meditation is one way where you can come up out of the frequency of fear and into a meditative state that is way more optimistic and abundant than the one that you're in normal consciousness. The second thing I would say is stop watching the television. Stop. My teacher that I had for many years said, people would go a lot further if they learned to use their imagination to dream the dream of the life they want to live. And that's my message to business people, anybody through these times, is that rather than turning on the TV and looking at all the stats of who's died and how many more cases there are and how bad the economies are and everything else, turn it off and ask yourself the question, if I didn't know anything about what was happening in my world right now, what is it that I want to create for myself going forward? Who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What do I want to experience? What do I want my business to be? What do I want my life to be? I mean, and spend time dreaming it. And there's a software called Mind Movies that is an exceptional way for you to be able to capture this and to be able to show it to yourself as many times a day as you need to. But the thing of it is that you need to start showing yourself the images, either internal or external, that represents where you're going to, and understand that you're creating it based on where you pay attention.
Great advice. And I have so much more to ask you, but we're just about out of time. So my final question to you is, how can people find out more about you and your work?
I have a website. It's www.mindfulchange.com. And on that website is my phone number. And my email address is heather@mindfulchange.com. Any of those ways. And I'm on Facebook as well.
Wonderful. Well, Heather, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today. We've been speaking with Heather Elliott about mindful change. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.